My name is Kath Dalmeny and I work for an organisation called Sustain. I think that deserves a little bit of a description because it's quite an unusual organisation. It's a charity, it's a campaign organisation, it's a non-governmental organisation, lots of kind of weird descriptions. What we do is we get together with lots and lots of organisations to try and solve problems in the food system. And while Sustain is not necessarily a household name, lots of our members are, so people like the RSPB, the Bird Lot, the National Trust, people who run little groups on particular issues like the Hyperactive Children Support Group, lots of health organisations interested in heart health, animal welfare, environment, sustainable consumption, all kinds of things. Very broad. As you've discovered, food is the most interesting subject. I hope you're getting that in this room. Tim Lang introduced it to me 10, 15 years ago, and I always love the chance to thank him in public for doing so. It's shaped my life. How fantastic. Because we get to talk about these issues all the time and also have to face up to some really massive things. Nice thing about Sustain is you get to face up to them in a practical way about solutions. So I don't have graphs, I have ideas for things we might do. But notice I say ideas. I don't know what we can do to fix the problems I've been asked to talk about, but I am very interested in how we start to co-create that as a set of people, as a culture. I also have a background in theatre. So I'm particularly interested to be here because I think there is something about taking a more artistic approach to this and a more exploratory type approach and also putting the big dilemmas on a stage and saying, let's talk about that together. That's what theatre's for. The very best theatre sends you out disturbed, concerned, having seen different points of view put on the stage. I came out of a Carol Churchill play once when I was about 21 in floods of tears, and it put me on a route to wanting to work on social policy, because she had put on the stage arguments that couldn't be resolved by two people on a stage but had to be resolved outside the theatre. So I think the meeting of food and theatre for me is really, really exciting. You can probably tell I'm slightly emotional about it. It's a fantastic meeting of the right sort of minds. So what motivates me to get out of bed in the morning, actually I'm not very good at getting out of bed in the morning, I was working till 3:30 last night, so let's pretend that I do, is this whole idea that we are living on a planet that provides us with everything that we need. The potatoes, the sweet corn, the wheat, the bread, the clothing that we're standing up in, the paper that we write on. How miraculously wonderful. I'm not a religious kind of person, but I do think there are miracles happening every day to make it possible for us to have a good time, for us to have theatre, to be able to drive around, to be able to have a culture, to be able to think about addressing things like malnutrition and obesity, to be able to entertain ourselves. So we get soil, we get water, we get metals, we get glass, we get rubber, but we get food, this thing that absolutely fundamental that connects us with the planet. Every time we eat, we are connecting with the planet and reminding ourselves of that story. There's a word that keeps on coming up from all of the speakers, which is resource. I'd quite like to unpack that a little. The word resource is something that can be resourced, can be sourced again and again. It keeps on coming for us. There are more potatoes every time, there's more wheat. When we go to the stream to get water out, the stream keeps on coming because there has been a weather system that feeds water into that stream. Well, I'll think about fish as well, because I'm coming round to the subject that Nigel has asked me to talk about, which is meat. But I'll talk about meat as fish and meat, because meat tends to be associated with animals. I do that because fish is a very interesting subject to think about, because the clarity with which we can think about what's happening in the fish system is really easy to think about. When it comes to meat, it's much harder, as some of our emotional words right at the beginning of this session brought out. Meat can sometimes be associated with neurosis, was that one of the words that people used? With difficulties, with challenges, with passion. I really love it. Let's talk about fish for a while first. Fish is a resource. It can be resourced because it breeds. It keeps on producing new baby fish. How amazing, what a miraculous planet we live on that keeps on producing fish for us. You catch a fish, there are some left next time for us to be able to catch again. Well, we hope so. Natural resources, unfortunately, we've treated them as if they will do that forever and ever without any possibility of running out. Well, unfortunately, of course, with fish, we understand now that things can run out and that there won't be more fish on more planets, as Tim mentioned. There isn't another planet we can get more fish from to feed ourselves. Let me do the nearest thing I ever do to a graph. Can I have 10 people to stand here, please? You don't need to do very much. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much, Angela. What an honour to have somebody from Kew here, fish. How exciting. 10, can you count? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2 more. Thank you very much. Now, imagine that this is all of the fish in the world that we can eat. Doesn't seem like it's very much, but just to say, so each fish represents about 10%. As I say, nearest thing I ever do to get near a graph. 500 million people rely on these fish directly for their living. So that is 500 million people with their families who make their money, their whole livelihoods out of being able to go to the sea, mainly the sea, and get this resource, something that can be resourced. I want 3 of you to split off a bit. Okay, I'm terribly sorry, but you can have to look a little bit miserable. You're the fish that are really, really seriously in trouble. If we take any more of these fish, those populations are likely to die out. And they won't be conveniently replaced by fish that we can eat. Normally when fish die out, something else comes in and takes over that ecosystem, and it's too late to do anything about it. You don't have to look too miserable, but if you don't smile too much during the rest of the presentation, that'd be helpful. So another 5.5 of you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you mind tearing yourself in half? Thank you very much. You'll be pleased to know that you're doing okay-ish. But what I mean by okay-ish is that you are fished to the limit. These fish stocks in the whole population of fish that we can eat at all, these fish, if you would like to give this one to this, I said, you get an extra fish. Thank you very much. There you go, your tail. This tuna has 2 tails. Genetically modified? Maybe, don't know. So you're doing okay-ish. That means you are fished to the limit. We can't take any more from these fish stocks, so we have to manage these very carefully. Here we have the last of you, the very few people left over. Actually, this one probably belongs here, so I'm thinking it's 15% on my bit of paper. Not very good at my graphs. 15% of fish stocks, this 1.5 fish left at the end of the line, are the only ones left where there is still room for manoeuvre, where more fish can be taken. But what's happening to the global population? It's increasing. It's increasing a lot. What's going on also with that population? They're getting a bit richer. What might they like to do with this fish? Eat more of it. But this is the only place where there is room for any expansion in the fishing effort. This has to be very carefully managed. If you want a picture, a very quick snapshot of why not only am I wearing a fish necklace to keep on reminding myself that I'm a campaigner and I must never forget this, this is the picture of what we're doing to a natural resource that was miraculously there for us. We're not doing it very sensibly. So we have to become really sensible. We have to look after you guys fantastically. We have to stop taking fish from you and put boundaries around. Even if we could put fences at sea, we would look after you so well you'd be treated like kings, queens, however you'd like to be. With this lot, we'd be saying this is very precious. Who should be having it? Should it be only the rich West, because we want to pay more for it in our restaurants? Or is it for the 500 million people, mainly from poor countries, who are relying on it? We are faced up to enormous questions when we start to look just at the fish issue. I'm not saying I know solutions. As a campaigner, what we've done is we've created a campaign that says, okay, we are the buyers, we're the ones with loads of money in the West. Let's make sure that when we're using that money, we're using it sensibly to support the kind of fisheries management, that's the right thing, to support the marine parks that would let fish do their thing, have little baby fish, kings with lots of baby fish, and then to use this sensibly and to bring it out into the policy domain that Tim occupies, that Susan occupies, and say, how do we do this properly? How do we do this sensibly, guys? This is the global population of fish. We can't get any more. There's not another planet to get it from. Thank you very much. You can put your fish down. You can keep your fish if you want. So my next props are about meat. I tend to think of fish as a really interesting one to think about because actually human beings have woken up to the fish problem already. There's a United Nations report that happens very regularly to make sure that that number is being checked on fantastically. That's the common brain starting to get together and saying, this is something we need to manage together, guys. We can't leave it down to individual choices to say, do I have the cod or not? Sorry, that's a shared cod. That's a shared opportunity for that cod to have babies and make more cod in the future. This is not something about just labelling. It has a role to play, choices have a role to play, but actually this is a bigger moral issue that we need to deal with. I'm going to shift sideways now. If you want to talk about meat consumption, it is very much more difficult, and I could not, in the same way that I just described here, start to say what are the absolute policy solutions for doing something about it. With fish, it's very well known. With meat, It's very much more open. Very difficult. We've already talked about cultural challenges, personal responses to it, rights, the idea of people being able to eat more of it if they come from developing countries, poor countries, to get better nutrition, the fact that there's overnutrition. Once it comes to meat, what about food waste? Wasting meat is probably the worst possible thing to do because, as Tim mentioned, all of the resources that go into making it, it's just such a valuable product. Huge issues come up. So I invite you to join me in not knowing what to do about it. Don't come into that space with preconceptions because it is an unknown territory, really, what we should do about it. Countries that get richer want to eat more meat. Who are we to tell them not to? But we're eating rather a lot of it, and it's using resources, for example, grain that is being fed to the animals that we eat, that they could be eating as grain. These are big, big, difficult issues. So I invite you, try and leave aside the emotional response just for a minute. Try and leave aside your assumption about what people should do. Also try and leave aside words like vegetarian and vegan just for a minute, because I think that can make it divisive. It can start to say like there's one way of doing it and not another. We all have personal responses to this. They can all come back in. But just for a minute, let's just think about what meat represents in the same way we thought about fish. Who would like to be some bottles of water? 10 people again. It can be the same people, doesn't matter. Would you like to be one? Okay. There we go. Thank you very much. 1, 2. Brian, you are such a reliably helpful person. Thank you very much. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Go on, one more. You all stand up. Oh, thank you very much, Rob. Man from behaviour change. He changed his own behaviour. Thank you very much. So, this time you are not all of the water in the world, because there's lots in the sea, and we don't drink that, we don't tend to use it for agriculture, but you are all of the fresh water in the world that is currently used by human beings. So it's not all the stuff that runs about in streams that we don't pick up, but it's all the stuff that human beings use. 9 of you split off, so gentlemen, I've put to one side, I do apologise. That is all of the water that is used for agriculture. So most of the fresh water in the world that is used by human beings is used for food, fuel, and fibres. Agriculture is not just about food, but it is mainly about food. Nice gentleman over here. Your drinking water, your showers, you're washing the car, you're watering the garden, you're everything else. And you look quite innocent in just standing there on your own, but you're also very unevenly distributed across the globe. So there are issues here as well. Some of this is privatised, sorry. Some of this is not available to people as a right in different countries. It's very unevenly distributed across the world. Some places it rains and some places it's very dry. Fine, all of those issues are in water, but of course this leaves this enormous amount of water that is used in agriculture. So, one of you split off. Rob, do you want to be? You can be farm animals. Doesn't look like very much, actually. You're the water that gets used to grow grain, to feed to chickens and pigs and dairy cows and all kinds of other animals. You're the water that they use to hose down cow sheds and used in slaughterhouses and all that kind of stuff, and food manufacturing. It's a lot of water for one single product that human beings consume. To feature on the map of water that big is very significant. We use I don't even know the units for this, ginormous amounts of water, huge amounts of water for one product to feature is extremely significant. So, where we've got another one. I think I'm not going to divide up all of these among all the different things. There's so many different ways of cutting this pie. Basically, human beings use a lot of water. You've gathered that. So, but what I do want to talk about is the fact that this is creeping up. So at the moment, this is mainly being used for farm animal products that are being eaten in Western nations. Mainly, obviously not only that. But it's looking like, with human beings increasing in number, like we said, also increasing in wealth, beginning to adopt Western diets, getting 37 McDonald's on their block in New York. Well, that will be happening in Delhi and Bombay and in Pretoria and all these places all over the world. It's looking like we're going to move to that pretty quickly. But of course, it isn't that. This isn't like fish. What we do is we end up taking more and more of it. So we'll end up... That doesn't mean that all of this consumption has decreased. It means that there are still more water needing to be taken out. It's increasing the amount of water that's being used. So more and more and more water is being used in human consumption. squishing down on all the rights and all of the other things we want to do with water. Again, we're acting as if we've got lots of planets to take this from. More people are wanting this stuff. So these forces, these pressures are coming onto our planet all the time. Of course, this is just water. I hate the fact that carbon dioxide is expressed in balloons, so I do apologise for this, but I really can't think of any other symbol that kind of does it. I mean, what does it mean that we let off gas when we're doing stuff? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to us. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you don't really know what effect it has. Is this stopping the sun getting in, being a greenhouse? I don't know. You guys are communicators. Please make it better. Make it more understandable for people what this stuff means. So, my next prop's being 10 balloons of greenhouse gas. I'm not even sure I need to hand these out, perhaps we can. Why not you be greenhouse gas and water? Why not, just for a minute? Put your greenhouse gas in front of your water, because you'll be coming to this. Do you want to take them and pass it on down the line? So let's just do a very, very, excuse me to all of the academics in the room who know better than this. This is very broad brush, of course. I don't do graphs. If we start from here, these three roughly are greenhouse gases from generation of energy in some way, electricity, gas, coal type of stuff in the whole system. These two, you'll now transport. Transport, trucks, cars, trucks, a lot of it there. Two of them, two more, industry, just general stuff, making things, you know, for people. One is, other stuff. It comes under some amazing titles in the UN documents, other stuff, but I'll call it other stuff for now. And again, we'll bring you two guys together. These two are from farm animals. But once again, same thing, it goes with the water, is that these are set to double because of people's desire to eat animal products and this change in culture towards using more and more animal products. And again, that does not mean that they're taking two of these. It means that more greenhouse gases will keep on being emitted further down the line. And a lot of that comes from what the animals are being fed, how they're being raised, the way they're transported, the fact that they have to be refrigerated. It's a very complex thing to have an animal consumed. Potatoes are relatively simple. They store very easily. They can be transported without too much damage. They do need refrigeration, otherwise they keep on growing, but not at the same sort of intensity. There aren't the same sort of food safety issues if you haven't bothered to refrigerate it for a while. Once you get to be working with meat, dairy kind of products, you're having to put a lot of energy and effort into looking after those to make them good for people to eat. And of course they are delicious. People are drawn to eating animal products. It is something that people want to do. So we're facing up to some really difficult stuff here. This is why I said at the beginning, leave aside your assumptions about how we tackle this, because it's bloody big. It's an enormous thing to do. And finally, no props here at all, but this is also the major cause of deforestation. So the loss of rainforests, the loss of areas of land put over to biodiversity, this critical thing that creates our air, creates our water systems, creates our weather, is being cut down in order to make the grain to feed these animals. You're not your animals now again, all of you. Apologies, you can do chicken impressions should you wish. This is a theatre workshop after all. Now, does it matter that we cut down forests? I will share an opinion. Yes, it bloody does. Because it creates our air, because it creates our water. I also care about the monkeys and the parrots and all the other wonderful things that are on our planet, because I do believe in miracles. I do believe in the miracle of the life that we share this planet with, but it's also because it's about survival. Thank you very much. You can put down your props, and thank you very much. Round of applause for these nice people. However, I just wanted to tell a couple of stories about what it's like in that world of politics, of the policy that Tim mentioned. So I get the impression already from hearing all the things that everybody said here that you're actually terribly well informed. I'm not just complimenting you, you don't mean well are. The things that people have said already is that our culture is beginning to wake up to this stuff. We don't really know how to tackle it yet. The trouble is when you hit politics with it, it's really tough, and we do need a kind of cultural change to start having this bigger conversation about what we do. So last year, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, I had the worst day of my professional life in Parliament because my friend from Friends of the Earth, Vicky Hurd, had been putting together a parliamentary bill to say we should be looking at feeding these animals more sensibly, not feeding them on grain that's been grown on deforested land, starting to think about where the feed comes from, reducing the, won't say footprint, maybe hoof print of cows, pigs, chickens, Chickens don't have hooves. Never mind, you're not recording, are you? Reducing that, having some legislation to start looking at it. Does anybody know what the term filibustering means?
American term.
Which means?
It's an American term. I can't remember the specific.
Okay, doesn't matter, it's not a test, so...
Is it to do with talking so much that the bill doesn't get passed?
Exactly that. So I sat for 5 hours in the Strangers' Gallery in Parliament watching that bill being talked out. The quality of the debate was abysmal. And I've read it again in Hansard recently because they write it all up, and it makes me weep. You know, this is where big stuff like this is our culture has to address this stuff, meets politics. There was opposition MPs, I won't say which party, but it was the Conservatives, who were braying every time an animal got mentioned. They were making noises like animals. They were mooing every time somebody said, perhaps we should eat less meat. And it was a sort of self-satisfied kind of like, yeah, but it's all right, don't you be talking, how ridiculous. And they talked for 5 hours at that level of quality. And my friend Vicky Hurd and I were sitting in the Strangers' Gallery just going, how do we make progress with this? It was actually a very helpful conversation. That clarifies your mind about politics when you're sitting there watching what you have worked on for that much time just get destroyed. Actually, I was there for a bill that was going to be talked about afterwards, which was about improving hospital food and putting in nutrition standards. That didn't even get a chance because they were so busy braying down in the political area. This is tough stuff. It's tough stuff because so much emotions are associated with it, which I think, again, this is where theatre helps. To start saying, our gut instincts are that this is something we're wedded to. It's large amounts of consumption, eating when we like, having, 37 different food outlets on the way to the station. You know, we deserve it, don't we? We deserve to have all this stuff. Also, it's just part of the culture. There's nothing we can do about that. That's just the way it is. It's the free market economy. You guys have to get to some really fundamental stuff that's down here somewhere about our relationship with food and about our relationship with the planet. And it's something that other generations haven't had to deal with because there weren't so many of us. It didn't really matter if you ate lots and lots of meat in the past because actually there was quite a lot of space for it to grow. Now there's set to be 9 billion of us. So our generation, this set of people, us, we have to deal with it. This is what our time is about. So I just wanted to share a few ideas of some of the things other people are doing, because lots of people are thinking about this, but quite quietly. I met a chap from Dairy UK, which is the industry body for the dairy industry. He knows this stuff, and he's talked to me. He was a really nice guy, and he started saying, I do get all this, but I really can't talk to you about it, because my industry just doesn't. I was like, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Well, how do we make it safer for him to be able to talk about it? This is what I mean about putting prejudice aside and emotions aside when we do start talking about this, to allow people to start unpacking it. This is about our future survival. This is about fairness. This is about whether or not people in poor countries will be able to eat. At the moment, we're eating their grain in the form of animal products. So, to finish with, as I said, just a few little stories of some of the things people are trying to do. They're small, some of them, but they're just imaginative beginnings to start unpacking this whole meat thing. As I say, fish is pretty much now a known territory of what we can do. Meat isn't. So, Paul McCartney is doing Meat-Free Mondays. It looks a little bit potty when you go onto the website, but it's very sweet. It's an attempt by him because of his ex-wife Linda McCartney was really into vegetarian sausages. He's now promoting Meat-Free Mondays. Well, that's a fifth of the week where somebody might try something different for a bit. It's not a great challenge. It's not vegetarianism. It's trying something different. There's the Food for Life catering mark that's working with 5,000 schools in the UK to start addressing sustainable diets in the round. And schools can start to work towards all of this stuff, to start to say, well, what dishes can we use that will treat meat differently? In the UK, the traditional diet is a slab of meat and 2 vegetables. Well, actually, curries, somebody mentioned here, are a really good way to use other bits in the animal because it all goes into a kind of stew-like pot, and you probably use less meat overall. Well, let's celebrate that and use it. Tapas, another great way of eating where you get small amounts of things and people can try stuff. Actually, the meat content of a tapas meal is often quite low, but we have a wonderful, varied meal, biodiverse meal at the same time. Friends of the Earth, working on this idea that the feed for animals should be sustainable. Let's take away a large part of that hoof print, and let's not bray at it when we bring it into policy. In other centuries, in this country, in other countries, it was a criminal offence to feed grain to animals, a criminal offence. Well, why isn't that like that now? Why would we possibly feed grain to animals anyway? Why has that become acceptable? There's a fantastic association of farmers who've just set up called the Pasture-Fed Livestock Association, who want to promote the idea that animals that are being fed on grass are better. Grass is at the foundations of so much of our agriculture, so much of our food. Let's celebrate that and let's defend it from being encroached on by this grain. We're working with some chefs on reducing food waste. We talked about chefs earlier, and they're not particularly rock and roll chefs. They're very lovely, but they're not rock and rolly ones. But they're very much talking about taking the message of less food waste, particularly less waste of animal products. We run something called nose to tail fortnight of eating the whole carcass, so that you don't waste anything. Getting used to, again, those unfamiliar cuts that our grandparents would have found just completely ordinary to use those. Putting good cooking lessons on the national curriculum. Michael Gove, listen to us, but national curriculum can be a place for cooking lessons. Of course that's a sensible place for people to be doing cookery. We do shout at him, he's dreadful. Training young chefs to be good at all this stuff, to use the whole carcass. When the Olympics, I was sat on a committee advising the Olympics on their food policy. We didn't succeed with everything, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, etc., full stop. Dreadful, talk to me about it if you'd like to. But they did find that when they were buying a whole carcass of a chicken, rather than just saying, we'll just use the breast meat and throw the rest away, which they were going to do, then they can make new dishes and make the whole thing more affordable and at the same time raise animal welfare. So they did clever things around saying, let's use the whole thing. Oh, look, it actually costs less. Those things have been forgotten. And we like the idea of promoting the message of eat less but better. Really enjoy the meat when you do have it. Use it really well. Have a fantastic dish. Put it back on feast days, as Tim said. Make it that really special occasion rather than the sort of slightly scummy, slimy stuff that it's in every sandwich every day. It's not that good, is it? Fun for this, we destroy the planet? Let's make it really special and use that really well. And let's feed pigs with food waste, for goodness sake. When I was a kid at school, we used to put all our plate waste from, it's mainly cabbage, because none of us would eat the cabbage, but put it into a bin for the pigs. It was perfectly normal. Then foot and mouth disease came along. One farmer in the north got accused of putting some of his waste in which hadn't been treated in the right kind of way. Everybody in a wild panic about the state of the British farming industry. Therefore, we've never been able to use food waste for animal feed since then. Back in the early 2000s. Let's bring it back. It's completely stupid that we can't use food waste for animal feed. Lots of countries like Japan have found ways of treating that in a way that can sensibly divert food waste to animal feed, treat it properly. That means you're not using the grain that could feed people. At the moment, the amount of grain, I'm told, that is eaten by animals could feed another 1 billion people. Just tomorrow, if you just did it, if you just changed that. I mean, that's just a moral issue. Again, I'm not religious, but that's a moral issue. This is beyond politics. This is about us as human beings. So, thank you very much, and thank you so much for the people who pretended to be balloons. It's very good. Thank you.